The envelope lands on the kitchen table with a sound like a slap. Wren Calloway reads it, standing up. Her mother's handwriting fills the front in tight blue ink. Inside, a single sheet explains that Wren has 30 days to find somewhere else to live. No argument preceded this, no warning arrived first. She is 20 years old, holding a letter that erases her childhood bedroom in 3 sentences. The kitchen smells like coffee and finality. She folds the paper once and slides it into her back pocket. She had been saving money from her job at a plant nursery in Greenville. The total in her checking account came to $2,340. That was supposed to cover community college tuition in the fall. Now it would cover something else entirely. She packed her belongings into 4 garbage bags and 2 milk crates over the span of a single afternoon. Her 2004 Honda Civic held all of it with room to spare. The passenger seat stayed open for the cat she had adopted 6 months earlier from a rescue event outside a grocery store. His name was Fenwick. He was a seal point mix with cream-colored fur that darkened to chocolate brown across his ears, nose, and all 4 paws. A smudge of cocoa pigment sat beneath his left eye like a thumbprint, pressed there by a careless painter. He weighed 9 pounds and carried himself with the slow dignity of a much larger animal. His tail was long and kinked slightly at the tip from an old injury nobody could explain. Fenwick watched the world through pale blue eyes that never seemed to blink at the right moments. Wren drove south and west without a destination. She passed through Easley and kept going. The foothills of upstate South Carolina rose gently around her, soft green ridges layered against a hazy sky. She followed Highway 178 until the road began to narrow and the towns grew smaller. Small churches appeared between stretches of pine forest. Hand-painted signs advertised boiled peanuts and firewood for $5 a bundle. She was not heading toward anything. She was simply heading away, and the car kept moving because she had not told it to stop. She reached the town of Walhalla on a Tuesday afternoon. The population sign read 4,300. Main Street ran straight through the center of town, past a brick courthouse and a row of storefronts with canvas awnings faded by decades of afternoon sun. A hardware store occupied one corner. A diner called the Steakhouse Cafeteria sat across the street with a hand-lettered specials board in the window. Wren parked in front of the Oconee County Administrative Building and went inside because the restroom sign was visible through the glass door. She had no plan beyond that single need. The bulletin board in the hallway changed everything. A yellow index card pinned to the cork read, "County tax forfeited property. One-room schoolhouse on Retreat Road. Structure and 0.4-acre lot. Minimum bid $10. Wren read it twice. She unpinned the card and carried it to the front desk. The woman behind the counter looked up from a computer screen and studied her for a long moment. Her reading glasses sat on a beaded chain around her neck. She asked if Wren wanted that old schoolhouse. "Honey, nobody has wanted that building in 14 years. The woman's name was Janelle Pruitt. She was 47 years old with auburn hair pulled back in a tortoiseshell clip. She had a habit of tapping her pen against her front teeth when she was thinking, a soft, clicking sound that filled the quiet office. Janelle served as the county clerk for property records and had held the position for 19 years. She pulled up the parcel information on her screen and turned the monitor so Wren could see the listing. Janelle told her it was built in 1887. Single room, clapboard siding, bell tower on top. The county had seized it for unpaid taxes in 2012. Nobody had bid on it since. "I have $10, Wren said. Janelle studied her face for several seconds. Janelle explained that Wren would need to sign a rehabilitation agreement, committing to make the structure habitable within 18 months. She paused and set her pen down, then asked if Wren was from around here. "I am now," Wren said. Janelle asked how old she was. Wren told her she was 20, old enough to sign papers, old enough to make a decision that would shape the rest of her life in ways she could not yet imagine. Janelle almost smiled and reached into her desk drawer for a manila folder thick with forms and carbon copies. The paperwork took 45 minutes. Wren paid $10 in cash from her wallet. Janelle stamped 3 forms, filed 2 copies, and handed Wren a key on a plain metal ring. The key was old and heavy, the kind with a long barrel and simple teeth. Wren held it in her palm and felt its weight, the weight of a building she now owned. Janelle told her the road out there was gravel past the church and that she would see the building on the left. It still had most of its roof, she added gently, like a warning wrapped inside encouragement. Wren drove Retreat Road with Fenwick sitting upright in the passenger seat. The gravel started just past Retreat Baptist Church exactly as Janelle had described. Pine trees crowded both sides of the narrow road. After half a mile, the schoolhouse appeared. It sat in a clearing of tall grass, its white clapboard siding gone gray with age and weather. The building measured roughly 30 feet by 40 feet. A small bell tower rose from the center of the roof, its copper cap turned green with a century of patina. 6 tall windows lined each side, and the front door hung slightly open on rusted hinges. She parked and sat in the car for a full minute. Fenwick pressed his nose against the window glass and made a small, chirping sound. "Well," Wren said to him, "we own a building." She got out and walked through knee-high grass to the front steps. The steps were stone, 3 of them, worn smooth by generations of small feet. She pushed the door open, and it groaned on its hinges. Inside, the single room stretched before her in dusty golden light. A chalkboard covered the entire front wall, still bearing the faint ghost of erased chalk marks. Wainscoting ran along the lower 3 feet of every wall, beaded board that had held up remarkably well. A cast-iron potbelly stove sat in the far corner, its chimney pipe still rising through the ceiling. The floor was wide plank heart pine, warped in places but mostly solid beneath her boots. If you have been following along here at Paw and Trail Stories, you know that moments like these are the ones we live for. A young woman standing in the doorway of a forgotten building, deciding it can become something new. The dust in the air catches the light from those tall windows. A cat waits in the car with his nose pressed to the glass. The future is uncertain, but somehow full of warmth. And that is exactly the kind of story worth telling here on this channel. Wren spent her first night sleeping in the Civic with Fenwick curled against her stomach. The temperature dropped to 48 degrees after midnight. She woke stiff and cold at dawn. The next morning, she walked the property boundaries with dew soaking through her sneakers. The lot was small but level, bordered by pines on 3 sides and the gravel road on the 4th. A well with a hand pump stood behind the building, its iron handle orange with rust. She tried the pump, and after 30 strokes, brown water coughed out. After 50 more strokes, the water ran clear and cold. She cupped it in her hands and sniffed. It smelled like iron and stone. She would need to get it tested, but the well worked. That mattered enormously. The first person to stop was a man named Wendell Hadley. He was 72 years old and drove a faded green pickup truck with a steel toolbox bolted to the bed. Wendell had a full head of white hair and a deeply lined face the color of walnut wood. He stood about 5 feet 8 inches tall and wore the same style of khaki work pants every single day. His particular habit was whistling hymn melodies under his breath while he examined things, a quiet soundtrack that followed him everywhere he went. He pulled into the clearing that morning and got out slowly, looking at Wren with frank curiosity. "You the one who bought this place?" Wendell asked. "For $10, Wren said. He whistled a few bars of something she did not recognize. He told her he had taught shop class at Walhalla High for 31 years and knew his way around old buildings. He walked to the nearest wall and pressed his thumb into the clapboard siding, testing it. The wood gave slightly but held. He told her the siding needed work in a few places, but the bones underneath were yellow pine. That species does not rot easy. He looked at her sideways. "You planning to actually live here?" "I am planning to try," she said. Wendell nodded and opened his toolbox. He pulled out a moisture meter and held it up like a doctor with a stethoscope. "Then let me take a look at the framing before you get too attached." Wendell came back the next day with a 20-foot extension ladder and a full notebook of observations. He tested the framing at 14 different points around the structure. The moisture readings came back between 11 and 15%, which he said was well within acceptable range for old-growth pine. The roof had 2 areas of active leaking, both on the north side where shingles had blown away in a storm. The bell tower appeared structurally sound from below, though neither of them climbed up to check it that first week. The potbelly stove needed new fire brick lining. The chimney pipe needed replacing entirely, as rust had eaten through it in 3 places. Wendell made a detailed list in his notebook with a pencil he kept behind his right ear. Wren's renovation budget came from what remained of her savings after the $10 purchase and gas money. She allocated $1,040 for materials and supplies. Every dollar had a destination. Roofing shingles and tar paper cost $187 from the hardware store on Main Street. Replacement chimney pipe and fittings ran $64. New fire brick for the potbelly stove cost $38. Lumber for repairing damaged wainscoting and soft spots in the subfloor came to $142. Plumbing supplies for connecting a basic sink to the well pump cost $196. A used window unit air conditioner from a yard sale on Short Street cost $75. Electrical wire, a breaker box, and outlets cost $211, purchased wholesale through Wendell's contact at an electrical supply house in Seneca. Cleaning supplies, interior paint, and brushes totaled $89. Wood stain and polyurethane for sealing the heart, pine floors, cost $38. That brought her total renovation spending to $1,040. A younger man named Tobias Reeves appeared on the 3rd day. He was 29 years old, lean and tall at 6 feet 2 inches, with sandy brown hair and a short beard that he kept neatly trimmed. Tobias worked as an arborist for the county parks department and spent his days climbing trees with a harness and chainsaw. He had a habit of carrying a folding knife that he would open and close absently while thinking, the blade clicking in a steady, unconscious rhythm. He had heard about the schoolhouse purchase at the county offices. He told Wren he could help with the heavy lifting on Saturdays. That dead pine leaning toward her roof needed to come down before it fell on the bell tower. Wren told him she could not pay him. Tobias waved the concern away like a gnat. Nobody had asked her to pay. Wendell was not charging either. That was simply how things worked in a place where people still recognized the value of helping someone who showed up, willing to try. Tobias brought his chainsaw and cleared the overgrown trees pressing against the building on every side. He removed 3 dead pines and 1 sweet gum that had been dropping branches onto the north side of the roof for years. Wendell handled the roof repair, working carefully on the damaged sections with Wren handing shingles up the ladder below. The work took 2 full weekends of steady labor. Fenwick watched from inside, perched on the windowsill where the afternoon sun hit the glass and warmed the old wood beneath his chocolate-tipped paws. He had claimed that spot on the first day and never once surrendered it to anyone. The electrical work was the most complicated piece of the renovation. Wendell had wired enough outbuildings and barns over the years to know the basics thoroughly. They ran a main feed from the power pole at the road, a distance of 140 feet through buried conduit. The county inspector came out and approved the connection after reviewing Wendell's work and testing every circuit. Inside, they installed 8 outlets along the baseboards, 2 overhead light fixtures with pull chains, and 1 dedicated circuit for the window air conditioner. The total labor cost was 0. Wendell refused payment flatly. Tobias refused payment with a wave of his hand. Wren tried to insist both times, and Wendell told her that helping a young person fix up an old building was the best retirement hobby he had found yet. Fenwick adapted to the construction noise with the calm indifference that only cats and old philosophers can manage. He slept through the sound of the hammer on the roof. He ignored the whine of the drill when Wendell mounted the breaker box to the wall. The only thing that startled him was the first time the overhead light came on, filling the room with electric brightness for the first time in more than a decade. His pale blue eyes went wide, his ears flattened. Then he blinked twice and returned to grooming his left paw as though nothing remarkable had occurred. Wren laughed out loud for the first time since she had arrived in Walhalla. The sound surprised her. The plumbing was simpler, but still required careful work. They connected a hand pump inside the kitchen area to the existing well using galvanized pipe that Tobias threaded and fitted himself. A single basin sink sat on a wooden counter that Wendell built from salvaged lumber he found stacked in a shed behind the Baptist church. The drain ran to a gravel pit 20 feet from the building. It was primitive, but entirely functional. Wren could wash dishes, fill pots, and clean up without walking outside in the rain. A portable toilet donated by Tobias's employer served as the temporary bathroom until a proper septic system could be installed down the road. By the end of the 4th week, the schoolhouse was livable. The chalkboard stayed on the wall because Wren liked writing grocery lists on it with actual chalk. The potbelly stove worked again, throwing heat across the single room on cool mountain evenings when the temperature dipped into the low 50s. The heartpine floors had been sanded by hand with rented equipment and sealed with 2 coats of polyurethane. They glowed amber in the lamplight like honey held up to the sun. Wren hung a canvas curtain to separate her sleeping area from the kitchen space. Fenwick's food and water bowls sat beside the warm stove, and his bed was a folded quilt on the windowsill where he spent his days watching finches and jays in the clearing outside. The bell tower had been sealed shut since before the county took possession of the property. A wooden hatch in the ceiling provided the only access point. Wendell had noticed it during his initial inspection, but said it was nailed closed from above. On a Thursday morning in her 5th week of ownership, Wren decided to investigate what was up there. She positioned the extension ladder beneath the hatch and climbed up with a pry bar gripped in her right hand. The nails were square-cut, old and deeply rusted. They pulled free with effort and a metallic groan. She pushed the hatch open and hoisted herself into the tower. The space was small, perhaps 5 feet square and 7 feet tall at its peak. The bell still hung in its iron yoke overhead, green with verdigris and silent for decades. Cobwebs draped every surface like curtains made of dust. But against the far wall, stacked neatly on a wooden shelf built into the framing, sat a collection of objects covered in oilcloth. Wren's hands trembled slightly as she pulled the first cloth away. Beneath it lay a stack of leather-bound books. She counted 7 volumes. Their spines were cracked, but the pages inside remained dry and remarkably intact. The oilcloth had protected them from moisture for what appeared to be well over a century. Wren sat in the bell tower for several minutes before she touched anything else. The air up there was still and dry and smelled like old wood and copper. She could see through the louvered vents on each side, and the view stretched across the treetops to the blue ridgeline in the distance. Ansel Whitmore had stood in this same space. He had placed his most valued possessions on this shelf and climbed back down, expecting to return. The thought of that made Wren's chest feel tight. She understood something about leaving without wanting to. She understood things left behind. She brought the items down one at a time, descending the ladder carefully with each piece cradled against her chest. The full collection filled the schoolhouse's old teacher desk, which still sat in the corner beneath the chalkboard where it had always been. Besides the 7 books, the bell tower had contained 3 rolled maps in cardboard tubes sealed with wax and a brass telescope in a velvet-lined wooden case. There were also 2 wooden boxes of mineral specimens with handwritten labels in brown ink. A leather satchel held 14 silver Morgan dollars dated between 1878 and 1891. A bundle of personal letters lay tied with cotton string. Everything had been wrapped carefully in oilcloth and placed on that shelf with obvious intention and great care. Someone had hidden these things deliberately. Someone had meant to come back for them. If this story has you curious about what comes next, you are in the right place here at Paw and Trail Stories. We tell stories about forgotten buildings, hidden treasures, and the people who find them when the time is finally right. Consider subscribing so you never miss a new chapter. The bell has more to tell us, and so does the woman who climbed up to hear it. Wren called Janelle at the county office that same afternoon and described what she had found. Books, coins, maps, a telescope, mineral specimens, and a bundle of personal letters from a man who had taught in the building more than a century ago. Janelle was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. "You need to call Philippa Orr at the Historical Society," she finally said. "If anyone in this county can tell you what you are sitting on, it is Philippa." The director of the Oconee County Historical Society was a woman named Philippa Orr. She was 78 years old, small and precise in every movement, with silver hair cut short and wire-rimmed glasses that she polished constantly with a cloth she kept tucked in her cardigan pocket. Philippa had written 3 books about the history of Oconee County schools and could recite enrollment figures from memory going back to 1870. She arrived at the schoolhouse within 2 hours of Wren's call, driving herself in a burgundy sedan that was older than Wren by at least 5 years. Philippa examined the letters first. Her hands moved with the careful patience of someone who had handled fragile old documents many times before. "These are from a teacher named Ansel Whitmore," she said quietly, adjusting her glasses. He had taught at this school from 1882 to 1904. She had seen his name in county records many times but never knew what became of his personal effects. She held one letter up to the window light and read a few lines silently. It was addressed to his sister in Charleston. He had never mailed it. It was dated March of 1903. "Why would he leave all of this behind?" Wren asked. "That is what we need to find out," Philippa said. The books turned out to be the most valuable items in the collection. 3 of the 7 volumes were first editions of scientific texts from the 1870s and 1880s. One was a copy of Asa Gray's Manual of Botany from 1878 with handwritten annotations filling the margins in precise brown ink. Another was a geological survey of the Carolina Piedmont published in 1881, with hand-colored plates showing rock formations and mineral deposits. Philippa recognized their significance immediately, but recommended a professional appraisal before any decisions were made. "These are not ordinary school books," she said firmly. "These are a scholar's personal library. This man was not just a country teacher, he was a naturalist of real accomplishment." The Morgan silver dollars alone were worth a considerable sum. Wren counted them again on the desk surface. 14 coins, each one showing Lady Liberty in profile. The dates ranged across 13 years of American history. Some showed heavy circulation wear from years of use. Others looked almost untouched, as if they had been set aside the day they were minted. She placed them back in the leather satchel carefully and locked the satchel in her car's glove compartment. Philippa arranged for an appraiser named Douglas Kincaid to visit from Greenville the following Saturday. He was 61 years old, tall and slightly stooped from decades of leaning over tables, with reading glasses he wore pushed up on his forehead when he was not using them. Douglas had appraised collections for museums, estate sales, and insurance companies for over 30 years. He arrived in a gray sedan and spent 4 full hours examining every item on the teacher's desk with cotton-gloved hands and a jeweler's loupe. The Asa Gray first edition with original margin annotations is worth between $8,500 and $12,000 by itself, Douglas said, turning pages with extreme care. He estimated the geological survey with hand-colored plates at $6,000 to $9,000, and the remaining 4 books at a combined $4,500. He examined the maps next, unrolling each one on the desk with weights at the corners. One was a hand-drawn survey of the schoolhouse property from 1887. Another showed the road network of Oconee County in 1890. The third was a topographical rendering of the Blue Ridge Escarpment done in watercolor and ink. Together, he valued the maps at $3,200. The brass telescope was English-made, a three-draw design with a mahogany barrel and polished brass fittings. Douglas estimated its age at approximately 1860 and its value at $2,800. The mineral specimens, carefully labeled in Ansel Whitmore's own handwriting, included samples of gold-bearing quartz, corundum, and several varieties of garnet native to the Carolina foothills. As a complete collection with documented provenance, Douglas valued them at $3,500. The 14 Morgan silver dollars, based on their individual dates, mint marks, and condition grades, were worth a combined $7,400. The personal letters and documents, as historical artifacts with direct connection to the schoolhouse and its teacher, carried an appraised value of $4,200. Douglas sat back in his chair and removed his cotton gloves. He looked at Wren across the desk with an expression she could not quite read. "The total appraised value of this collection is $52,100, he said. The figure could shift a few thousand in either direction, depending on the buyer and the market. He paused. "You paid $10 for this building?" "I did," Wren said. "That may be the single best return on investment I have ever documented in 30 years of doing this work," Douglas said. He was not smiling, but his eyes held something very close to wonder. That evening, Wren made dinner on a portable camping stove she had bought for $12 at a thrift store in town. She heated a can of soup and ate it slowly at the teacher's desk, surrounded by the artifacts of a man who had lived in this same room more than a century before her. Fenwick ate his kibble beside the potbelly stove and then jumped onto the desk to investigate the leather satchel. Wren gently moved him away from the coins. He protested with a single soft meow and then settled beside her elbow, his warmth a small comfort in the big quiet room. Wren sat on the front steps afterward with Fenwick curled in her lap. The cat's dark ears twitched at the sound of crickets waking in the tall grass beyond the clearing. His cream-colored body was warm against her legs. The sky above the foothills turned from blue to amber to a deep violet that settled over the tree line like a quilt pulled up to the chin of the mountains. She thought about Ansel Whitmore climbing into that bell tower with his treasures wrapped in oilcloth. She wondered what had prevented him from coming back. She wondered if he would have approved of the person who finally found them. Wendell stopped by the next morning before breakfast. He stood in the doorway and looked at the items spread across the desk. He whistled low and long, the sound trailing off into the morning air. "My grandmother mentioned the name Ansel Whitmore once when I was a boy," he said quietly. His grandmother had told him Whitmore was the smartest man in the county and the loneliest. He picked up the telescope and extended it carefully, section by section, the brass tubes sliding out with a whisper. "He left all this up in that tower like a time capsule nobody was supposed to open." Wendell turned to Wren and asked what she planned to do with the collection. She told him she had not decided yet, but the letters were not for sale. Those stayed with the building, because they belonged here the same way the chalkboard did and the bell did. Wendell nodded slowly and said that was the right answer. Philippa returned the following week with photocopies of county records she had spent days tracking down. Ansel Whitmore had taught at the Retreat Road Schoolhouse for 22 consecutive years. He never married. He boarded with a farming family named Trotter a mile down the road. In 1904, he left Oconee County abruptly and without public explanation. The records did not say why. His personal effects were listed as unclaimed by the county. No family member ever contacted the authorities to retrieve them. Philippa believed he had hidden his most valuable possessions in the bell tower before departing, fully intending to retrieve them when circumstances allowed. He never did. Over a century passed in silence. The schoolhouse changed hands twice, fell gradually into disuse and eventually reverted to county ownership through tax forfeiture. "You are the custodian of his memory now," Philippa told Wren. She said it plainly, without sentimentality or ceremony. It was a statement of fact, and it carried the weight of one. Wren made her decisions over the following days. She would sell the telescope, the mineral specimens, and 10 of the 14 Morgan dollars. That would generate approximately $31,700 based on Douglas's conservative appraisals. She would keep the books, the maps, the personal letters, and 4 of the coins as permanent pieces of the schoolhouse's history. She would use the sale proceeds to install a proper septic system, add insulation to the walls and ceiling, and eventually build a small addition for a real bathroom. The schoolhouse would become a permanent home. It was already becoming one, day by slow day. Tobias helped her build sturdy shelving along the back wall to display the books and framed maps. Wendell built a custom display case for the 4 remaining Morgan dollars from a piece of black walnut he had been saving in his workshop for 6 years, waiting for the right project. Philippa donated a framed photograph of the schoolhouse taken in 1903. It showed 16 children standing on the front steps with a tall, thin man in a dark suit and high collar. That man was Ansel Whitmore. He stood slightly apart from the children, his left hand resting on the doorframe as if he were holding the building up. His face was angular and serious. He looked like someone who had many thoughts and very few people to share them with. Wren hung the photograph above the chalkboard on a nail she drove in herself. She wrote Ansel Whitmore's name on the board in careful chalk letters beneath it. Fenwick sat on the desk below, his pale blue eyes fixed on the old photograph as if he recognized something in the face staring back. The cat's cream-colored fur caught the light from the tall windows, and his chocolate-dark ears stood at full attention. He was 9 pounds of quiet watchfulness in a room dense with history. Animals know these things that we sometimes miss. They feel the weight of rooms that have held generations of voices and laughter and chalk dust. The schoolhouse on Retreat Road sits in its clearing today with new white paint on its clapboard walls. The bell tower's copper cap still shows its green patina, and Wren has decided to leave it exactly that way as a mark of time passing. Smoke rises from the chimney pipe on cold mornings. A Seal Point cat watches the world from his windowsill perch. The chalkboard still bears a teacher's name written in careful letters by a woman who never met him, but who understands what he left behind. She paid $10 for the building and found $52,100 hidden in the bell tower above her head. She spent $1,040 making it livable. The numbers tell one story. The unmailed letters in the satchel tell another. If this story moved you, we would love to have you as part of the Paw and Trail Stories family. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale from this channel. Every week, we bring you stories of forgotten places, unexpected discoveries, and the quiet courage it takes to start over with almost nothing. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Wren and Fenwick will be here on Retreat Road, and the bell tower will keep its remaining secrets a little more gently now that someone finally climbed up and listened. She found a home for $10. She found a teacher's legacy wrapped in oilcloth in the rafters above her ceiling. And she found that the thing hidden in the bell tower was not just worth $52,100 in appraised dollars. It was worth the knowledge that some places hold their breath for decades, waiting patiently for the right person to walk through the door. Wren Calloway walked through that door at 20 years old with a cat, 4 garbage bags, and no plan whatsoever. The schoolhouse had been waiting since 1904. Fenwick had been patient in his own quiet way, and the story, as these stories always do, found its way to exactly where it needed to be told.